There is no shortage of humanitarian supplies going into Gaza is beyond cynical. It is absolutely inappropriate. It ought to be completely condemned. We in Israel know well the true colors of the United Nations when it comes to their operations inside the Gaza Strip. Hamas gets to have a say, and it is clearly saying no. The Israel Defense Forces has implemented daily humanitarian pauses that are going to run from about 10 o'clock in the morning until 8 p.m. each day until further notice. Now, what the viewers should understand is that that's actually instructive about the status of the fighting inside the Gaza Strip. And that type of operational activity and that operational cadence actually strongly resembles the way in which we operate in other arenas, such as Judea and Samaria or the West Bank. So with very few exceptions, our high-level raids, our high-level operations will take place during the course of the night. And during the day, we tend to operate less. The fact that we are able to implement a similar cadence inside the Gaza Strip at this time, for the time being, really is testament to the fact that we've continued to downgrade severely Hamas's military capabilities as a terror army. It's no longer a terror army. What Israel is fighting against at this stage is a guerrilla insurgency, and our operations are counterinsurgency operations and becoming ever more clearly of that nature. But there are two problems here. Unlike in the other arenas in which the IDF operates, in the Gaza Strip, that guerrilla force continues to hold on to and hold captive our hostages, both the living and the dead, and also in the Gaza Strip, that guerrilla force is able at this stage, if given the space, time, and oxygen to do so, to reconstitute itself, to replenish its ranks from among the Gazan population, and to return as a threat against the state of Israel and the people of Israel. And both of those considerations need to be tackled because they are central parts of the stated war aims, namely to bring back all of our hostages and to return them home, both the living and the dead, and to bring about a reality wherein Hamas can never again constitute a threat to the people and to the state of Israel. I can say with total confidence that there is no shortage of humanitarian supplies going into Gaza, nor has there been since the first few weeks of this war, because there has been a strategic decision made by the primary advisor to Prime Minister Netanyahu that we can pursue our security and strategic goals on all 7 fronts that we have to face down, as long as humanitarian aid continues to flow into the Gaza Strip. Unfortunately, as a result of a cynical campaign by Hamas, buoyed by the cynicism and the foolishness, quite frankly, of the international community that lies ever ready to accuse Israel of the most horrendous things, in this case, of deliberately facilitating and manufacturing a famine inside Gaza, which is totally false. As a result of that intense media campaign, Israel has decided now to be demonstrative in its alleviation and prevention of starvation inside the Gaza Strip, namely by carrying out airdrops over the area. Once the aid is deployed, it is very difficult to know with any degree of real precision where its landing point will be. These are not precision-guided munitions. These are airdrops of pallets of food over the skies of the Gaza Strip. By Israel airdropping the food into Gaza, it's giving a degree of credence to the completely false, unfounded allegation that food and humanitarian aid was not being sent into the Gaza Strip, hence the need to deploy that aid from the skies. So I find all of this very problematic, and I come back to the idea that the government of the State of Israel move with all possible urgency, dedication, and focus to the implementation of Donald Trump's vision for the Gaza Strip, to have the displaced Gazan population relocated in countries, both neighboring and non-neighboring countries, that are able to absorb the Gazans into their midst. And I believe that the countries who are shining the most attention on the difficult situation inside the Gaza Strip ought to be the countries that volunteer, first and foremost, to absorb the Gazans into their midst. And as I've said many, many times before, if you are a fan of the Gazan people, you should not want them remaining inside the Gaza Strip. The distraction is massive, it is extensive, it's beyond my capabilities to fully describe, having served in the war zone, inside the war zone during the course of this war. More than 5 million Syrians have been absorbed by Turkey, by Lebanon, by Jordan, and by Germany since the outbreak of the Syrian civil war, and more than 5 million Ukrainians have been absorbed by neighboring and non-neighboring states. The estimate of the Gazan population in totality rests at below 2 million. If countries were truly of goodwill, they would be able to absorb the Gazans swiftly, capably, and bring about an end to the difficulties that emanate from inside the Gaza Strip. I just want to ask you that if you're enjoying this content, please be sure to give it a like and make sure you check out the MirYam Institute YouTube channel, where you'll find more analysis, podcasts, and incredible and exclusive footage. If you want to see our very latest content, don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you'll get notifications promptly. And remember, we want to hear from you and hear your questions. So please let us know what those are, and we'll be sure to answer them. The notion of supplying humanitarian aid into the Gaza Strip is not one that's been met with great enthusiasm among the Israeli population for various reasons. Number one, the fact that this terror organization, Hamas, murdered 1,200 of our citizens on October the 7th. Now, the world seems to have forgotten all of that, but we have not forgotten that in Israel, nor will we, nor should we expect it to forget that atrocity. The world seems to have forgotten about the fact that we have hostages inside the Gaza Strip held in the most horrific circumstances. And as a consequence of my work with the hostage families whose loved ones are still being held in the dungeons of Gaza, and my work with hostage family members of hostages who have been returned home, I know very, very well the appalling conditions in which our hostages continue to be held by this terror organization. And we in Israel will not forget that. So as the international community continues to sanction the state of Israel, accuse the state of Israel, defame the state of Israel, delegitimize the state of Israel for not supplying humanitarian resources and aid to the Gaza Strip and making those accusations falsely, I remind the international community that we have hostages that are not being fed, they are not being provided with water, they are living in horrific conditions, conditions that I'm familiar with, but am not permitted to speak about on air. And until those hostages are returned home, domestic support for the increase of humanitarian aid into the Gaza Strip is not going to be particularly high. But having said that, the government of Israel has yet continued to supply humanitarian aid to the Gazans by way of hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of aid trucks that have mastered our borders, that have been moved into the Gaza Strip, incidentally, with all of the attendant risks that emanate from an operation such as that. And for the United Nations to raise its voice and to impugn the motivations of this government when it comes to its determined delivery and sustained supply of humanitarian aid into the Gaza Strip is beyond cynical. It is absolutely inappropriate. It ought to be completely condemned. We in Israel know well the true colors of the United Nations when it comes to their operations inside the Gaza Strip. We know of the United Nations workers who participated in the October 7th massacre. We know of the United Nations facilities that were permitted to be hijacked for terror activities by Hamas inside the Gaza Strip. We know and we understand who the United Nations are, and we will not pay any attention to their criticism. We will not pay any attention to their continued delegitimization of our very existence here in the State of Israel. We'll continue this fight, and we will continue to do that which is in accordance with our own national conscience when it comes to the matter of humanitarian aid. If it wasn't already clear to everybody by this stage, it ought to be clear to everyone now. Steve Witkoff, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and President Donald Trump have all blamed Hamas for the failure of the recent negotiations to release our hostages and to bring them home and to bring about a ceasefire inside the Gaza Strip. For far too long, far too many people have insisted that Israel simply needs to make a deal right now for all hostages in return for all of the demands that Hamas is putting forward. And what people completely fail to realize is that, as has been demonstrated once again on this occasion and has resulted in another collapse of the negotiations, Hamas gets to have a say, and it is clearly saying no. It will not accept the Israel Defense Forces maintaining a presence around the perimeter of the Gaza Strip, even though that is absolutely vital to Israel's security. It will not accept Israel's insistence on retaining a security presence along the Philadelphia corridor, even though that is the only way to prevent another October 7th massacre from happening again. And it will not accept any diktats that call for the return of all of our hostages in one tranche, even though we in Israel, of course, want all of our hostages home together as one immediately, both the living and the dead. Those hostages are the life insurance policy for the terror organization that is Hamas. And therefore, what we must do is we must negotiate for all hostages that we're able to bring back. We've had some successes until this point. We must also negotiate for the bodies of hostages who are no longer alive. We must continue to press the military offensive inside the Gaza Strip. And as I know is the case among the upper echelons of the Israeli defense establishment, we must continue all of the efforts that are absolutely underway on a daily and nightly basis in the planning rooms of Israel's intelligence branch and of our operations branch. We must continue to plan for any and every opportunity to rescue our hostages by way of a military operation, a rescue operation. Now, all of that is ongoing. All of that has been ongoing since the October 7th massacre and the kidnapping of our hostages. I'm afraid that there is no alternative to continuing to focus on all three of those prospects: pushing the military offensive, staying ready for the opportunities where we might be able to rescue our hostages by way of a high-level operation, and of course, bringing Hamas to the negotiating table once again. How do we do that? Perhaps by intensifying our targeting of their leaders inside Gaza and, of course, outside Gaza as well. People want the war to come to an end. We also want the war aims to be realized and to be achieved and obtained. And I think that at the end of hostilities, when we do finally get to that day, Israel will have to hold the perimeter around the Gaza Strip, north, east, and south. Israel will have to hold a security presence in the Philadelphia corridor in perpetuity. It can never again outsource the patrol of Gaza's southern border with the Sinai Peninsula to the Egyptian security forces. They're completely inept at best, corrupt and complicit at worst. And I believe that Israel must move towards the implementation of the only vision put on the table, namely Donald Trump's vision for the Gaza Strip, the Gazan people being allowed to locate themselves outside of the Gaza Strip. And I think that the international community that seems so very committed to the well-being of the Gazans, to the complete and utter dismissal of all of Israel's very legitimate, correct and proper security considerations, that same international community should show its largesse by absorbing the Gazans into its midst.